Today, skies across the United States will burst into manufactured constellations of red, white, and blue. Families will gather on blankets, their faces upturned, watching the spectacle unfold. This is the 4th of July. It is a day steeped in a powerful, carefully constructed narrative of liberty. We are told stories of brave patriots who threw off the yoke of tyranny to establish a nation conceived in freedom. This is the grand illusion, the story we tell ourselves. It is a tale of heroic struggle and ultimate triumph, a foundational myth that paints a simple, clean portrait of American birth. Parades will march down Main Street celebrating this singular vision of independence. This accepted history, however, is a selective one. It is a story with glaring omissions, a narrative that intentionally smooths over the jagged edges of its own creation. It asks us to celebrate a declaration that proclaimed all men are created equal while conveniently ignoring the millions who are not considered men at all. The fireworks are meant to dazzle, to distract from the uncomfortable truths lurking in the shadows of the celebration. They are loud, designed to drown out the quieter, more painful histories that challenge this simplified tale of national glory. This annual ritual of remembrance is, in many ways, an exercise in collective forgetting. It demands we ignore the inconvenient realities upon which the nation was built. The problem is not the celebration itself, but what it chooses to celebrate and what it demands we ignore. The very document at its heart, the Declaration of Independence, was a radical statement of rights for a very specific group of people, white, land-owning men. For everyone else, its soaring rhetoric was a hollow promise, a cruel irony. The freedom being celebrated was not a universal human right, but a privilege secured by some at the direct expense of others. This holiday, therefore, becomes a performance of unity that masks deep historical divisions that continue to shape the nation today. On this very 4th of July, in 2025, we must look beyond the spectacle. We are taught to view this day as the birth of freedom. But for whom? This is the essential question that complicates the fireworks and festivities. The colonists sought freedom from British rule, but they were not interested in extending that freedom to the indigenous peoples whose land they occupied, or the enslaved Africans whose labor built their new nation's wealth. The independence they declared was the independence to continue their project of expansion and exploitation without interference. To truly understand this day, we must be willing to peel back the layers of myth and confront the complex and often brutal reality that lies beneath. The truth is far more complicated than a fireworks display. The story of American independence cannot be told without acknowledging the story of indigenous dispossession. The untamed wilderness that colonists sought to conquer was, in fact, a continent of ancient and complex societies. The 13 colonies were built on land that had been inhabited for millennia. The revolution was not just about freedom from a king across the ocean, it was also about securing the freedom to expand westward, to claim more land. This was a core motivation for the colonists. They saw the British Crown's attempts to regulate westward expansion and honor treaties with native nations as an infringement on their own liberty, the liberty to take what they wanted. The birth of the United States marked the beginning of an accelerated and brutal campaign of ethnic cleansing and land theft. The concept of manifest destiny was not a later invention. Its roots are firmly planted in the Revolutionary era. The new nation's independence unleashed a relentless drive for territory that systematically dismantled indigenous sovereignty. Treaties were made only to be broken, promises of peace were used as tools of war, land was taken through force, through coercion, and through fraudulent legal maneuvers designed to strip native peoples of their ancestral homes. The very existence of the United States as a coast-to-coast entity is a direct result of this foundational violence. This process was not accidental, it was policy. From the Indian Removal Act to the reservation system, the United States government systematically worked to erase indigenous presence from the landscape to make way for settlement and resource extraction. The freedom celebrated on the 4th of July was a freedom predicated on the unfreedom of others. It was the freedom to build a republic on stolen ground. While settlers celebrated their newfound independence, native communities were facing the loss of their lands, their cultures, and their lives. The fireworks that light up the sky are explosions over a crime scene that has never been fully acknowledged or reconciled. Today, the legacy of this history persists. Indigenous communities continue to fight for their sovereignty, for the protection of their remaining lands, and for the recognition of the treaties that the United States has consistently violated. The struggles over pipelines, sacred sites, and water rights are not new conflicts. They are continuations of a resistance that began the moment European ships first appeared on the horizon. To celebrate the 4th of July without acknowledging this ongoing history of colonization is to perpetuate the very erasure that the nation was built upon. It is to celebrate a birthday while ignoring the profound birth defects of the nation. While colonists were drafting a Declaration of Inalienable Rights, nearly 1/5 of the population within those same colonies was held in brutal bondage. The hypocrisy is staggering. The liberty so passionately sought by men like Thomas Jefferson, who himself enslaved hundreds of people, did not extend to the Africans and African Americans whose forced labor was the engine of the colonial economy. The wealth that financed the revolution and built the new republic was extracted from the bodies of enslaved people. Their suffering was the invisible ink on the Declaration of Independence, the silent clause in the Constitution. The freedom celebrated was a freedom for the enslaver, not the enslaved. This contradiction was not lost on Black Americans. Many enslaved people saw the revolution as an opportunity, a chance to secure their own freedom by siding with the British, who offered emancipation to those who would fight for the crown. Thousands of Black soldiers did fight for the American cause, often with the promise of manumission. They risked everything for a nation that refused to see them as human, yet after the war was won, these promises were largely betrayed. The institution of slavery was not weakened by the revolution, it was strengthened, enshrined in the laws of the new nation, and protected by its founding documents. This betrayal echoes through American history, a recurring theme of exploitation and exclusion. The Civil War may have ended chattel slavery, but it did not end the systems designed to control and exploit Black labor. The 13th Amendment, which formally abolished slavery, contains a critical exception, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. This loophole was immediately exploited, giving rise to convict leasing and chain gangs, slavery by another name. It created a direct pathway from the plantation to the prison, ensuring a continued source of forced, unpaid labor, primarily from Black communities. This legacy is alive and thriving today in the modern prison-industrial complex. The United States incarcerates more people than any other nation on Earth, with Black and brown communities disproportionately targeted. Inside these prisons, a multi-billion-dollar industry operates on the labor of incarcerated people who are paid pennies an hour, or nothing at all. This is the modern iteration of the 13th Amendment's loophole. It is the continuation of a system that profits from the subjugation of a specific segment of the population. The economic engine of forced labor, which began with chattel slavery, has simply changed its form, hiding in plain sight within our justice system. The commercialism that surrounds this holiday serves as another potent distraction. As we celebrate, vast fortunes are made. An estimated $350 million is generated in a single tourist town like Big Bear, California, for its fireworks display. This massive economic activity creates an illusion of shared prosperity, a celebration of the American dream. Yet it unfolds against a backdrop of staggering economic inequality. The system that generates such immense holiday profits is the same one that perpetuates a widening wealth gap, denying millions of people, often the same communities marginalized by history, a fair chance at economic security. This is not freedom, it is commerce papering over injustice. The fireworks themselves are not benign. In 2025 we see conflicts from coast to coast. In California, a fight rages to protect a family of bald eagles, the very symbol of the nation, from the trauma of a fireworks show. In Calgary, a stampede beginning today is scrutinized for its history of animal deaths, a spectacle masking suffering. In San Francisco, a new parade is born from a divisive political battle over public space. Even the air we breathe is compromised, with air quality alerts issued due to the pollution from these celebrations. Our methods of celebrating freedom actively cause harm to the environment, to wildlife, and to vulnerable members of our communities. What then is the path forward? It is not to abandon the idea of patriotism, but to redefine it. An honest patriotism cannot be built on comforting myths and willful ignorance. It must be forged in the uncomfortable fires of historical truth. It requires us to look at the flag and see not just the stars of the states but also the scars of the nation's history. It demands that we listen to the voices that have been silenced, to acknowledge the debts that have never been paid, and to see the deep injustices that persist in our laws, our economy, and our society. This is not an act of condemnation, but an act of profound love for what the country could be. A true celebration of freedom would be a national day of reckoning and commitment. It would be a day dedicated not to loud explosions, but to the hard, quiet work of justice. It would mean fighting to dismantle the prison-industrial complex, honoring treaties with indigenous nations, repairing the economic damage of systemic racism, and building a society where the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a guarantee for all, not a privilege for some. We should also learn to embrace as a nation the immigrants that come to our shores, be it for economic opportunities or escape from oppression. This is the only patriotism that matters. An honest patriotism, rooted in truth and dedicated to the unfinished work of creating a nation that is truly free for everyone. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.